Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It is time once again to talk about Star Wars X-Wing miniatures by Fantasy Flight Games. It's been a little while, but Fantasy Flight has finally graced us with a new preview article, and it's a very highly anticipated one at that, about the wonderful Starwing, aka the assault gunboat. And it's really good to see that they're leading off strong with this, and they're really giving it the appreciation that people want. I'm also going to apologize in advance if I kind of space out a little or something. I'm going to try not to do that, and maybe watch my editing, but I think I'm getting over being a little bit sick or something, so sorry if I, space out or anything. But let's get into it. As you can see from the spread, we've got a decent deal of things to look at here, and actually, once again, FFG has pretty comprehensively spoiled the contents of this expansion pack. They did that with Guns for Hire, and they've done it with other stuff in the past. It's very interesting that they're doing it with this, especially since it's so hotly anticipated. But we can basically know everything that's in here now, because it's either old stuff or new stuff. And actually, interestingly enough, they have also spoiled the dial already, which we'll be covering first before we get into the individual pilots and so on. So, the Starwing has 1 forward, green, 1 banks, white, 2 turns, white. It has 2 banks and 2 straight, which is all green, which is good. And then it's got the full set of typical 3s, all white, turns, banks, straight. And then it has a 4 red straight. So for an Imperial player, not that special. No 1 turns at all. No green turns. But here's the thing. Remember, and we'll cover more of this later, but remember, this thing has slam on its action bar, okay? So, compared to the K-Wing, this is very open. It can even do some fun stuff here. It's got 3 turns, so it doesn't need a K-turn, or sloops or talon rolls or anything. And it's got at least the full set of banks and the full set of straights, so you can pretty much well adjust where you're going to end up. The only thing that the Starwing does not have in abundance is pilot skill, but we'll probably cover that in a second. But otherwise, this dial's really, I want to say it's open. It's got a decent selection of greens, not too fast, not too slow. Slam makes it extremely flexible. They cannot be impressed enough how flexible Slam makes all this, okay? So that's really good. And even if you're not slamming, you still got a 4 forward straight, even if it's red. That's good. By the way, you're not slamming on that because it's red. Slam is an action. I don't think there's really anything else to say about this dial. So, let's talk pilots. First up, we have the bottom tier generic, the new Squadron pilot, befitting the classic X-Wing and TIE Fighter games. So, here's your baseline stats. For 18 points, yes, 18 points, a generic coming in under 20 points, you can run the new Squadron pilot, PS2, 2 attack, 2 agility, 4 hull, 3 shields. Pretty standard fare. It's got a nice, solid, heavy fighter build. Very Rebel-esque. And it has the focus, target lock, slam, and reload actions. So let's go over those again really quick. Obviously, focus and target lock, everybody knows. Slam, in case you're not familiar, you basically perform the action, you do another maneuver, and actually, let me double check what the specifics of slam are. Yes, so slam, you pick a maneuver on your dial. It's the same speed that you already did. So you slam a 1 into a 1, a 2 into a 2, a 3 into a 3. It's an action, so unless you do some kind of upgrade or something, you can't slam into a 4. And you can only do straights anyway, so that wouldn't be great unless you really wanted to move 8. And then you are assigned a weapons disabled token, which is removed at the end phase, and performing slam counts as a maneuver. You cannot do slam as a free action. So slam's pretty good. It makes the K-Wing, which is the other ship that comes with slam by default, very flexible. It can make large ships flexible with burnout slam. And all in all, it's got some interesting applications. It's a kind of reposition and kind of not. It's very, very interesting. Slam's not super effective on the new Squadron unless you really need to get somewhere. It's not like a masterful repositioner because this thing has a firing arc. But, it's useful. It'll get more useful as we go on. Especially as we cover some things that maybe accept that rule about weapons disabled tokens, huh? Reload is actually interestingly similar. You pick I believe it's any number of discarded missile or torpedo upgrades, and you discard them, you flip them back face up, and then you get a weapons disabled token, just like with Slam. By the way, something important to note, the advanced Slam nerf has basically been confirmed. There's a new version of the text in this article, and in general the article only talks about it. You can only advanced Slam into performing an action on your action bar. So, that's very good for Star Wings. It's gonna kill Advanced Slam on K-Wing in serious play, I think, because that only has 2 actions, and Advanced Slam is a modification. But on the new Squadron, you can slam into a reload, and all your weapons disabled tokens are ditched to the end phase anyway. Or you can slam into a target lock into something that'll come up later. And then, naturally, the upgrade bar on the new Squadron is just torpedoes and missiles. After we cover the pilots, we'll talk about the titles, and that'll change that up a little bit, but for now, just think it's a generic, it's got 1 torpedo, 1 missile, 18 points, pretty inexpensive, very good action bar, solid stat line. We'll develop more on that in a second, because we have to talk about the other pilots. So the other generic is the Squadron Veteran, once again, following the naming convention. There's not a whole lot to talk about here. For 2 more PS and 3 more points, you get a 21-point generic, which has an EPT. That's pretty good. At 21 points, that's a comfortable, possibly 4 or 3 of them with heavily upgrades. And it's generally something I think Imperial players really want. They want more generics with EPTs. Well, here we are. Very reasonable price point. Decent enough starting PS. It has that edge on some other bottom barrel PS ships for cheaper. Got some solid design. It's not necessarily the greatest, but hey, it's cheap enough that I think it works. Like I said, especially with that low cost. You can't run 5, and we can debate whether or not 2 PS and an EPT is worth 3 points, but otherwise, there's not much else to say here. It's just a very solid bump up, and I think the Squadron Veteran is going to see some of the most play out of these various pilots. Our first unique pilot is Lieutenant Carsabi, 5 PS for 24 points with an EPT. I think that's a little bit of a steep jump. That's 3 whole points for a pilot ability and 1 PS, but it's a decent ability. When you receive a weapons disabled token, if you are not stressed, you may receive 1 stress token to remove it. So let's think about when you would receive a weapons disabled token. Mostly, I believe, it's just either slamming or reloading. This means that if, say, you don't have one of those titles, which we'll cover in a second, about using certain secondary weapons while you have a weapon disabled token, or for whatever reason you're not, normally doing that, you can, if you have no stress, take a stress to ditch it. I think that's very situational, and especially for its higher cost, Lieutenant Carsabi is a little pricey for their mid-level PS, but they're still cheap enough that you might be able to kit them out with something, and I think in this case it's mostly just an insurance policy. It's just something you keep in your back pocket. If, say, you have to keep it cheap, like you can't afford an advanced slam for some reason, or you just are in an oddball situation where you're not stressed, but you need to shed your weapons disabled token early for whatever reason. You can probably do some builds with some heavier weapons, which we'll cover later about the XG1 title, though obviously I think most of that's been spoiled preemptively anyway. So you can probably think about maybe some ways this will be useful, but I don't think it's a super exceptional. Mostly it's a unique pilot with a slightly higher PS jump. And then the last pilot in this pack is unique, Major Vinder, PS7 with an EPT, so you can bump him up to PS9. Costs 26 points. That's only 2 more than the PS5, so that's a very fair jump. Possibly why good old Carsabi is so expensive. They, kind of worked backwards, as it were. His pilot ability is, when defending, if you have a weapons disabled token, roll 1 additional defense die. So, he can slam and do very good at it. Be very defensive. That means it's effectively got a 3 agility, not counting anything like rocks or whatever that might be giving you extra defense dice, range 3, that sort of thing. Range 3 is entirely possible if you're slamming. You might get out of there. It also means when you reload, you get a defensive buff. This is very good, very flexible, especially with what you can do with the Star Wing. So I think, especially since he can be VI'd up to PS9, I should say, Major Vinder is a real winner in this pack. You're going to be seeing a lot of action with this guy for only 26 points. That's real good. solid hull and shields on this thing, 7 HP, with a decent mix between the two. The 2 attacks, nothing to write home about, but we might get into some stuff that helps that later. But especially with what you can do with things that give you weapon disabled tokens, reloading and slamming, and some of the interactions the Starwing has with that, Major Vinder's pretty good, I think. I think he really upsells. The 2 pilots you're going to see the most are going to be Rogue Squadron Veterans and Major Vinder. There's not much else to talk about with the pilots, so let's go ahead and leave them and talk about the titles. So the first title we're going to talk about is the one we already knew about, for the most part, XG1 Assault Configuration, Alpha Class Starwing only, title. Your upgrade bar gains 2 cannon upgrade icons. You may perform attacks with cannon secondary weapons that cost 2 or fewer squad points, even while you have a weapons disabled token, 1 point. So, what does this do? Well, it's very good in concert with another upgrade we're going to see later, Linked Battery. We'll cover that in more detail in a second. But in general, it means you get 2 cannons. The only other ship that has a double cannon slot is the IG-2000, very strong. The abilities don't necessarily mesh, but here it is. You get cannons if they cost 2 or fewer squad points, so flechettes, tractor beams, and as predicted later, the jamming beam we'll cover briefly later. Those all count, so you get a lot of support actions, so you can slam and support, you can slam and tractor and still do stuff, and then have another ship follow up. Though I will say that the lower PS generics are not as good for that. But the other thing is just in general, you get 2 cannon slots. The generics are cheap enough, you might try something crazy like a Mangler or a heavy laser cannon, that's what I'm looking for. I was trying to de-abbreviate it in my mind. HLC. HLCs aren't really common, but hey, these things are cheap enough, you could do some weird stuff there. That might be a use for Carsabi, like I said, giving them a heavier cannon with this title, and having them choose to shed the weapons disabled since they can't use it and still slam. You're not going to probably use this in concentration with Reload a lot because the 2 titles are exclusive. You still get 1 torpedo and 1 missile slot, but generally you don't want to overload ships, especially since the ship has a fairly low cost floor. So you probably want to just stick to either munitions or cannons based on what you're doing, which is very effective, I think, in designing the Starwing. But yeah, that's a pretty nifty title. Now the next title is pretty interesting because it's one that wasn't spoiled. So this is the OS1 Arsenal loadout. Obviously, Alpha Class Starwing only title. Your upgrade bar gains the torpedo and missile upgrade icons, so now you are double missiles, double torpedoes. You may perform attacks with torpedo and missile secondary weapons against ships you have locked, even while you have weapons disabled token. 2 points. So, this is a lot better than people thought. There's no point restriction, instead you need to have the target locked. Now note, say if you want to equip unguided rockets, because you can now, because you'd have 2 missile slots, which is good, I think. You can do that and still target lock them. You just need the focus to fire. You don't need to spend the target lock. That is just a requirement to get around weapons disabled tokens, if you have them with OS1. And another important thing to remember is, you can, if you have advanced slam, you can slam and TL. So you lock them, you slam to get close, you lock them. If you're smart about it, you might be able to get, proper positioning on them. That's probably best for somebody like Major Vinder. That way he gets, big boosts with his defense and can, make some attacks and stuff. Otherwise, yeah, I think it's just in general, it's good. It's good for the Starwing because it gives it a serious business weapon loadout, double torpedoes, double missiles. With the cost of the actual title at 2 points, that bumps up just the lowest level generic, the new 220. So you're not going to use all those slots except maybe with unguided rockets and something, unless there's a double torpedo upgrade coming out soon. And honestly, I think the Starwing would have been a good place for it. There's probably not a lot of use in using all those slots, but it's there. It has symmetry then with the XG1, and it's mainly going to be used for the fact that now if you slam or you reloading especially, you can still use your choice of torpedoes or missiles. Very strong. But obviously fair, because it costs 2 points and, you have stuff to have a target lock and all that. So let's talk about some of the things you can use with these titles. First off, linked battery. Small ship only, limited. Obviously this is a major balancing factor for it in the case of the Starwing, and also preventative against the IG-2000, I think, the aggressor. not the TIE aggressor, hence why I say IG. When attacking with a primary weapon or a cannon secondary weapon, you may reroll 1 attack die, 2 points. So, this is, pretty basic. Unfortunately, you can't just plug, because it's 2 points and the title is 1 point, you can't just plug XG1 and then linked battery on 5 of the new Squadron generics, but you could plug it on 4. You could do a similar thing for the row. Keep it cheap and just get an auto reroll out of your dice. It's a cheaper Predator. It's good, I think, for the XG1 configuration. They only have 2 attacks, so it gives you more security, if not more maximum damage on your basic attacks. Free rerolls are very good in that respect. It also is good with maybe some other cannons if you're doing a focus on that. Because it has double cannon slots, obviously, it can actually, utilize this better. The only other place this card is really good, the only other ship, is B-Wings, because it's pretty cheap, and B-Wings have 3 attack dice, that gives you even better. Even their generics can afford basically a Predator, for 2 points, combined with FCS and something, you've got very strong accuracy. Probably not as good as FCS, because it's only 1, but you can use it all the time. You don't need to do a first pass with no target lock. You get your reroll immediately. There are some other small ships with cannons. I don't think it helps them out much. You're not going to want to take this on a Defender, for instance, because you've got TIE D. You can double tap with light cannons. There's no reason to take it, even with your 3 attack dice. It's small ship only. That kind of hurts, I think, some of the bigger ships, but I guess they wanted to make sure it couldn't be used and abused on other ships. Like, say, the YV666 could use it, but it would be very effective with that. It's got a lot of, stuff in its back pocket to use in there. And obviously the IG-2000, has double cannon slots, so it could get some weird mileage out of that, I'm sure. Especially with abilities tied to cannons. So, yeah, it's not great that it's only small ship only, but it has its advantages. It's a good effect like this. A lot of people thought it was going to be another double tap. I thought it was going to be another double tap. In this case, it's more like a synced turret effect, which I think is good. Synced turret is not optimal in a world of TLT, but otherwise it's a very good card type, and I think we should get more stuff like this. God forbid, if A-Wings could equip this kind of thing, that would be very useful, don't you think? And similar, speaking of things you can do with XG1 Assault Loadout, let's talk about the other cannon upgrade in this pack, the Jamming Beam. It is exactly what you expected. Attack 3, range 1 to 2, 1 point, attack 1 ship if this attack hits, sorry. Like I said, a little spaced out. If the attack hits, assign the defender 1 jam token, then cancel all dice results. So it's Tractor Beam, but with the new jam tokens, which in a sense can be more effective than tractors in some places. I mean, you can't put people on rocks, but you can eat their focus evader target lock tokens. This can be very effective, I think, in the uses of some ships. It's hard to do with lower level generics because obviously you want to get their tokens before they can use them, but you can, in fact, slam and jam. And because of the fact that you can slam and jam, its range restriction isn't so bad. You can probably find your sweet spot where that range can be hit. Other than that, like I said, not much else to say about here. It's just another lovely little support cannon that I think people will get some use out of, much like they got some use out of tractor beams. If nothing else, hey, jammers on TIE D. And then one last upgrade to talk about, something people have been very curious about. It's the EPT Saturation Salvo. So everybody who called that, good on you. This is a little bit wordy, so stick with me on this. After you perform an attack with a torpedo or missile secondary weapon that does not hit each ship at range 1 of the defender with an agility value lower than the squad point cost of the torpedo or missile upgrade card, must roll 1 attack die and suffer all damage or critical damage rolled, 1 point. So, let's unpack that a little, because it's very lengthy. And I will admit, this is a thing that I don't necessarily like, that we're getting more complexity, but at the same time, we've seen that some open-ended cards without specificity can be too good, and I think especially with some of the things that you can combo with this, like Harpoon Missile, because who has 4 agility, there's some reason to be careful about this. So, first, you must attack with a torpedo or missile secondary weapon. So, in the case of the Starwing, Saturation Salvo is clearly intended to be for the OS1. If it does not hit, you must then, each ship at range 1 of the defender, which, you are at range 1 of yourself, so also the defender, rolls, who has an agility value lower than the squad point, not equal to, lower, so unguided rockets is 2 points, for instance. So if you miss with unguided rockets, everybody who has 1 agility in range 1 rolls, and then they suffer damage accordingly. This does not say note enemy ships or whatever, so you can accidentally saturation salvo yourself. Don't fly too close to the sun, guys. I think it's interesting. It's another nail in the coffin to Fairship Rebels and certain types of formation flying. The developers have said they haven't specifically intended any of this to kill Fairship Rebels. It just kind of happily turns out that at the same time, or rather immediately after they released a fortressing type formation flying archetype, elements with the Azatuk to completely complement all that, they have released several upgrades like Harpoon Missiles and like Saturation Salvo, which is a 1-point EPT, mind, that will deeply hurt it, because hit or miss, you can definitely try and do some forcing through of the scatter damage if the situation isn't to your liking. And because the Starwing, at least, can reload, it can keep doing this. It doesn't care if it missed. It'll just get it back. Or even better, if you're not advanced slamming, you can always just take munitions failsafe. Oh, it missed. I keep it. And then you can reload out of that if you actually hit. It's very well useful, but at the same time, it's got some complexities. There's some multiple stages. I think it needs these kind of restrictions in order to be so low cost. I don't think it's a golden bullet for anything, but at the same time, it will definitely help people who don't like a very unpleasant style of play. And I haven't said this before, but this is my opinion on stuff like Fairship Rebels, like those sorts of builds. From a mechanical standpoint, I admire that that this game exists in a state where people can put these kinds of interesting combinations together. That greatly appeals to me as a very technical or mechanical-minded person. At the same time, it's very much not inimical to how people think this game should be played, how people want to play this game, what kind of stuff I like to do playing this game. So I think it's good that counterplay is very quickly building up. Now we just need to figure out what to do about bombs. And, the game will be in a great place of, well, you've got options anyway. And obviously, yes, even as you could see from the picture, this obliterates TIE swarms. I've heard that FFG's a little dismissive of that opinion, but I also kind of agree. If they actually said, well, if it's killing an archetype, nobody was flying anyway. I mean, okay. People weren't using TIE swarms for other reasons. I suspect if those reasons that why people aren't flying TIE swarms go away, or something moves to counter them, it'll be very good that prior to whatever you want to say that initial knockout was for, the TIE swarm was effectively the most optimal build in the game. It'll be good if maybe there's some solid counterplay options, which, keep in mind, have very strong restrictions, like the fact that you need to sink 5 points into this to make it work. Right? You get that? Okay. So that's Saturation Salvo. So that's about it for the pack of the Starwing. We can see from the spread that's basically all the cards spoiled. The only other cards in the pack are cruise missiles, which is good that Imperials get access to this in a directly Imperial pack. I don't know how useful it'll be since your best maneuvers are 3s, but, that's a decent die attack. And maybe you can use it with, saturation. And the other thing is Advanced Slam, which obviously is, the only real place for it now is on the Starwing, I think. Other than that, everything else is covered. It's just rules reference cards. All in all, good pack, solid design. Not immediately too strong, not immediately too weak. I'm sure there'll be some people who declare it dead on arrival, as always. But I think it's very solid. Very solid otherwise. All around a good ship. A very balanced ship that I think the Imperials will probably enjoy. Having had problems with ships being not quite punchy enough, or, having other various strong issues. It'll be a very good to build a medium, well-rounded fighter. Really emphasizing Imperial multi-roles lately, I think, which is good, because I think, honestly, a lot of Imperial players got themselves too much in their mindset of their, K-turn every round defenders and, multiple action TIE interceptors. I think it's good that they've got more flexible ships. So that'll be that. Obviously, they're finally doing these spoiler articles. And actually they've said that due to some kind of delays or something, even though they count as separate waves, Wave 12 and 13 will all be released roughly the same time frame. That'll be interesting to see. Excuse me, lost my voice there a little. So, obviously, we'll be seeing more of these. I think the next one in sequence is probably the Kimogilla? I think that's the next one. We got any cards that are previewed about that? Yeah, okay, so the Kimogilla is 70, and the Assault Wing, the Star Wing, sorry, off-class Star Wing, the Assault Gunboat, to be real, that's 69. Heh. So that'll probably be next. That's got some interesting cards in there. You know, they've got their own copies of Saturation Salvo. They've probably got a missile that does, whatchamacallit, jam tokens. That'll be really interesting to see. Obviously, a lot of people are concerned that, scum cancer, whatever, you know, we'll see how bad it gets from there, and then, obviously, then after that is the Sheetapede, and then, you know, if they're going to be released at the same time, we'll probably keep going through the layers, and we'll hit on the announced later but earlier numbered stuff with, you know, 67 and 68, the Bomber, the Resistance Bomber, and the TIE Silencer. So, hey, you know, that'll be a thing. So that about wraps up this video. Sorry I talked quite so long about it, but, you know, it's good when you've got a lot of news. It's good that you have some things to talk about. Hopefully you don't mind that I blabbed on so long. If you do mind or don't mind, be sure to let me know in the comments down below, along with any other opinions you have on this expansion pack or anything related to it. Always love to hear feedback on any subject. If you like this video, go ahead and please give it a like. If you want to see more videos like this and you haven't already, please subscribe. I make it very easy because it's in the end slate of every video. And, you know, keep watching for more. As FFG puts out more news, I will release more videos. Thanks for your time, everyone.